This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
This episode of Momming While Muslim is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Join Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, president of Zaytuna College and Guidance Residential, for a live webinar on how Islamic home financing is providing a permissible path for Muslim Americans to finance their homes. Register for very limited online seats at gr.link/mwm_ncw_Hamza HAMZA_YUSUF. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our week and how we're going to do this. And, I think Uzma's right now are you in Portland? You're like traveling all over the world crazy.
Yes.
Like, what are you up to?
I don't know. For somebody who's as scared of COVID as I am, I'm not really sure why I'm traveling so much. But yeah, I went to Portland a couple of weeks ago. And to fill people in, this was after our Nashville trip. Because remember, right after Nashville, I tripped over the open suitcase, broke two toes, and dislocated one.
Yes.
So obviously, the next week I had to go to Portland, and we were supposedly hiking, my girlfriend and I. So I'm wearing the ugly hiking sandals, but everybody wants to go to the waterfalls in Portland. Okay. So I was like, I want a photo shoot up at the top by the waterfall. So I'm going to wear a pretty dress.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
With
so
your old people shoes?
With my old people shoes, I wore a really pretty gown, and I hiked up the mountains to the waterfalls. And then guess what? The bridge is like 3 feet across. So, and there's like 100 people on it. So you can't really take pictures. And everybody's staring at me because they're all in proper hiking gear. And like my shoes are all wrong because they're open-toed, like hiking sandals. And then I'm wearing this weird dress. I'm just like all kinds of juxtapositions going on. And people were so confused about it. But, it was what it was. I still had fun, especially when I got out of the dress. It was a lot better.
Oh my gosh. So I can't wait to see the pictures of that, because I do know you were making fun of me for unpacking. Like, I always unpack the same day I come in, no matter what happens. I like to put everything away. I have my packing cubes. And she was making fun of me. She's like, why do you do that?
Oh, I think Rubina was making fun of me.
Rubina was making fun of me.
I'm an unpacker too.
You're an unpacker too.
Immediately.
Except the one day she didn't. Guess what happened, everybody? She broke her toe. So that is
unpacking suitcases. Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah, she does not do that. And she broke her toes. So lesson learned to everybody. Please unpack and put your stuff away. But how's your week going otherwise? Your toe is okay, and it's kind of
it's healing. It's not swollen anymore, so that's good. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. I know before I introduce our lovely guest, because you can see her on the screen, Uzma's going to take us a little bit through our soapbox. And quite frankly, we have a lot to unpack here. And I'd love to get our guest's take on it once she finishes her soapbox, because let me tell you, it's been a very busy week for the U.S.
Well, a busy probably year. It's things that we did not really realize were happening or didn't stay on top of. So we have a lot going on. I get it. There's school, there's COVID, there's work, there's life. I think with people coming to us, especially when we're visibly Muslim, asking us about what's going on in Afghanistan or what do you think about it? I mean, yesterday my contractor started talking to me about it, and he's on the wrong side. Obviously. So it was like, please don't make me fire you. Please don't make me fire you. Just stop talking. So I wanted to give us some bullet points in case you needed some help, and obviously referring you to Haranissa Faryad of Sister Act on that podcast, because she's actually an Afghan. So if you want to get her take on it, there's some videos that she's got up on her socials if you want to check those out. But I kind of boiled this down to like some bullet points to help you. In February 2020, there was a Doha agreement where the last POTUS, remember how much we liked him, not Joe Biden, the guy before him, shook hands with the Taliban and decided that we would pull out all American troops out of Afghanistan by May of 2021. And then of course we know after February is when the lockdown happened and we ended up in a pandemic. So basically, I guess what he thought was, okay, the Taliban is going to be fine. They're agreeing to let us go, and the Afghan forces will have control. They will maintain control and be okay. However, these Afghan forces, as soon as that happened, apparently the sentiment is from Afghan sources on the ground, from their like military heads, is that the Afghan forces kind of lost their morale because now American money is coming out as the troops were slowly being removed. And so there was a lot of corruption, a lot of bribes, and the Taliban just basically negotiated and took a lot of the, like rural outposts and slowly was rolling in, and their goal was to get to Kabul. Then beginning of August, we start hearing, oh, there's this like debacle of pulling out. Taliban was getting closer to Kabul. So President, what's his name, Ashraf Ghani of Afghanistan decides to flee the country. And when the president leaves the country, there's always going to be trouble, right? So yeah, of course, Taliban is going to come in and take over Kabul. It's been happening over a year though. So I'm not really sure exactly why America is all up in arms. This is like, ooh, it's so newsworthy that the Taliban took over. No, they've been rolling in and we gave them the green light to do it. Remember, our last president did that. And now they are calling themselves the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. There were originally 300,000 Afghan forces to 100,000 Taliban. And so as Muslims, we know what a 3-to-1 ratio means in war. So if you know, the Taliban easily overtook 3 times its strength. We know that US citizens and people with special immigrant visas, people who are Afghans who are working with the United States, were granted evacuation. I think they said 123,000 people have been removed, but the numbers of who's remaining is anywhere from 100 to 600 US citizens supposedly left in Afghanistan. And I read somewhere yesterday, a US official was saying, I think it was the Secretary of State, Blinken was saying that, oh, those people didn't want to come home. I know in 5-10 years, we're going to find out otherwise, but I think that that's really interesting. So the reason why there's such a mass evacuation is that anybody who colluded with Western forces is going to potentially be looked at as an enemy and be tortured or worse. And then, of course, people who don't want to follow the Taliban rules of the veiling or the burqa, they're not going to want to stay there. I think they're already closing down girls' schools. So there's all of that happening. Our military fears that the Taliban will give cover to al-Qaeda or other terrorist cells, but last February, that's what the Doha Agreement was. They agreed not to do that anymore. But I think what they want, the military complex in the United States wants to stay over there to keep the kids in order because they can't rule themselves. So you can see where that's like imperialist colonial thinking. And that is what I think bothers us. I'm not really sure what Afghans feel about that, so I'm going to let them speak to it. John Marshall, who is a writer, says that after 20 years, it was up to the Afghans to decide their own future. This is a fight for Afghans, not another generation of American boys. A perpetual deployment was not in the security interests of the United States. So, as Muslims, we have basically laughed this whole time at Westerners who thought they could ever convince Afghans that they were helping them, because we killed, the numbers say 150,000 Afghans in this 20-year war to like our 3,000 troops, right? But the numbers are probably higher. We know they're higher. We didn't orchestrate targeted attacks all the time. Sometimes we indiscriminately also killed collateral damage. So people on the ground don't like us, and they're really happy that we're leaving. I know there's the contingency of 123,000 who left, but I'm saying overall, Afghan forces on the ground, or the public doesn't love the West right now. We're also laughing at the imperialism. Like, it takes white people from the West to control the brown people in this, cowboy country. No, it doesn't. They have their own set of rules and their own tribal agreements and understandings. Let them figure it out. And if they can't, they'll implode. That's okay. Let it happen. We come in when there's genocide happening. And I hate to say wait until genocide happens to intervene, but we watch the Srebrenica massacre happen. We watch what happens in Palestine all the time. We don't get involved over there. Why is Afghanistan so special? And in the end, Osama bin Laden wasn't found in Afghanistan. He was found next door in Pakistan, and we never bombed the crap out of Pakistan because they're a nuclear power, right? So our everybody who's saying right now, oh, the girls in Afghanistan, if you cared about the girls in Afghanistan, we would not have indiscriminately bombed their country and created a lot of widows, created a lot of these girl orphans, and created all of these problems, because now all those people have to be rescued and brought to all these different countries and resettle without language, without education, without cultural knowledge, to start from scratch without a head of household. So it's just really, really annoying. The other thing that we can do as moms is welcome refugees, because I mean, we created this problem. We wouldn't have a refugee and immigration problem if we didn't create the problem in the first place, but our government did what they did. So our soapbox is, know the bullet points, get involved with the refugee crisis, shake your head, and defer people to an actual Afghan when they ask you, what do you think about the problem in Afghanistan? I do think it's important to say that we knew that this was coming. Everybody who says it's so surprising, like, you obviously don't know that the different parts of the Muslim world are that they're different, and you grossly underestimated, because they like sweep and they kind of decide stereotypically blanket all Muslims are the same way. Afghans are a special breed, and they didn't see it coming. We all did. We're not surprised at all. That's our soapbox for today.
That's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to leave it to the experts to continue unpacking that, because I'm still in the process of learning it. Like you said, there's a lot of information coming out, some fake news, some not so fake news. And it's a good thing that we have somebody here today to help us with that, because we're wrapping up our Muslims in the News series this month, and hope that our guests take, I can't read because I don't have my glasses on. Can I put my glasses on? Or
You
will
can
I
always
look
put your
really
glasses on,
bad?
pro glasses.
Because I can't read
40-year-old
today. I'm
eyes.
getting old. I'm getting old, everybody. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. We wrap up our Muslims in the News series this month, and hope that our guests have demonstrated how important it is to ask the right questions and ask the right people these questions, and make sure the newsroom or desk is as diverse as its stories. And we have somebody here today that is doing just that. We are going to introduce Noor Tagouri. Noor is an award-winning journalist and producer of stories. We were able to hear it firsthand. She is a documentarian, and she has a podcast series herself called Sold in America: Inside Our Nation's Sex Trade, and it received a 2019 Graces Award for Best Investigative Series. And I have to say, I started listening to it after I saw her speak and it's just a totally eye-opening experience. So I highly recommend it for people. She spent a decade talking about identity, representation in media, breaking barriers through storytelling. She's also a businesswoman, and we got to give her props for that. She's a boss who launched her own consulting and production company, At Your Service, that works with partners to tell representative stories. And we recently had the good fortune to meet her and hear her. Literally, we were crying in our seats because she knows how to tell a story. So hopefully we're not going to be crying today, because I already cannot see. So welcome, Noor, and I really, really appreciate you being here. And thank you for dealing with a little bit of our flow today is a little bit off, because we normally have Joe, our producer, and he is busy with his kiddos. So we miss you, Joe, and welcome, Noor.
Alaikum, Noor, welcome.
Thank you, Zeba. Thank you, Uzma, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay, that's awesome. So we usually kick it off by asking people, especially if they don't have kids, tell us about your mom and how your mom informs your work. I love
my
this part because kids who talk about their moms, they're like gushing, and some of them get really teary at the end.
Oh, I love that. And I wish that for so many people. I know it is such a privilege to have a decent relationship with your mom. Like that, I've learned as I've gotten older that it is not as common. And that doesn't mean that I haven't had rifts with my mom. And I'm also so just incredibly grateful. I mean, like my earliest memories with my mom is like her dressing me up in her clothes and her jewelry and her make. Like she used to always say that she would just like play doll with me, because it's just us two. I'm her first kid, and she had me when she was 21 or 22, which is super 22, I think. Which is so young. And
And she was just like just literally my hero. I mean, I grew up in a very conservative white town in rural Maryland, and I felt a lot of shame around my identity. And I think that that's like a huge part of like some of the sadness that I have about my relationship with my mom is that I felt shame around her because she wore the hijab when I was growing up. And I was so embarrassed by that. Um, but she didn't like even now when she hears me say that, she's like, I didn't realize it was that bad. But like, of course, like I totally understand. And she did so like she was always just so involved and so supportive. I mean, I have like a Lisa Frank journal that she used to like, and through high school, she would still pack my lunch and write notes, and we would like write to each other in this journal. And I like FaceTime her. I mean, the last couple of weeks I've spent in our cabin unplugged, like not on my phone at all, and just writing and just being. And I haven't talked to her as much, and it's so odd. Like I maybe talk to her every other day, but I like FaceTime my mom like 6 times a day. It's kind of ridiculous. And it's amazing. I love her. And it was so great when I like got to start traveling the world, because I started being able to take her with me everywhere, and we have done so much together. And she's always been my number one. It's so funny. Me and Adam were joking about it this morning. I was like, thanks for being my number one fan. And he was like, that's your mom. I'm your number two. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, duh, obviously. So I'm her number one fan too. I mean, I actually might not be anymore. My little sister, Lena, is very obsessed with my mom. Like she takes these like creep photos of her and is always like stalking her. It's so funny. She like sends us just Snapchats of my mom just existing, and my mom hates it, but we love it.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, I mean, she is literally the best. I'm excited for her to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, especially if she's your number one fan. It sounds like she's going to be listening to it. That's awesome. So tell us, so you started with your mom. Tell us a little bit about your family background, because I actually didn't know that you grew up in rural Maryland.
Yeah. So I was born in West Virginia, lived there for 8 days, moved to Alabama for a few years, and then I grew up in Southern Maryland until we moved out of there when I was almost turning 14, 15. And then we moved right outside of DC. And I am the oldest of 5 kids. We're a really big family and loud, and everybody has a very specific personality, and somehow we are all still of each other. And it's just so much fun. Like everyone does something completely different or loves completely different things. So it's just really interesting.
So I'm being from the DC area as well, or at least now I am. I still consider myself from Chicago, let me just tell you. So it's really hard for me to say that I've been living here for 18 years. But for you, you talk a lot about media representation, right? And this is the first time I'm hearing that you were embarrassed, or maybe embarrassed is not the right word, of your mom, because it's not where you're not
no, that's the right
represented.
word.
That is the right word. Yeah, because it's something that is not known. I mean, I wasn't necessarily embarrassed by my parents, but I didn't realize that having 2 different colored parents, right? Like biracial, as I'm biracial, was a thing until other people started pointing it out to me. Then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, I'm not normal. So I totally hear what you're saying where that's
Well, that's a
concerned.
great point that you mentioned that, because now that I think about it, I was actually just writing about this. I don't think that the embarrassment really started until this kid in my class was really like made a funny face and said, "Why does your mom wear that thing on
That
her?"
exactly. And you don't know it until you see other people looking at it from their perspective. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're like, maybe
Well, it
that
was
is
that,
not
and then it was,
normal.
of course, 9/11. Like I was in 3rd
Yes.
grade, so I was
So
7.
you were a baby during that
Yeah.
time. So
So that's
yeah,
like my whole life is post 9/11.
9/11.
Like that is the world that I lived in. And I also always knew I wanted to be on television, like from when I was a child. I literally, like from maybe like 3 years old, I was like, this is all I want to do is ask people questions. I didn't even know what the name for that was until I was like 12.
Oh,
And
that's so awesome.
yeah. And the investigative project that I am going to be announcing next week.
Ooh, do we get a preview at all?
When does
No
this
hints.
episode come out?
Next
Today.
Today.
It drops today.
Oh, well, no, I can't.
You're like, darn it, I can't.
No, we
Yeah,
can't give
but
any
if you
spoilers.
if you check out Podcast Noor next week, that's our guided storytelling podcast. And if you're just following along, we have a couple of really big announcements to make. But
Ooh,
and
inshallah, we're excited.
inshallah. And yeah, so the investigative project that I'm working on is rooted in that story of identity. And like I was just kept thinking to myself, like, why did I feel so much shame around who I was? And then I realized, oh, it's the industry I work in. Like
Mhm.
it is literally the storytelling industry that told me stories as a child that I internalized that said you could only be on TV if you look like this. Your story
Exactly.
is only worthy if it comes from this angle. Like that's something I've really been unpacking until now. Like even after all the work that I've done, oftentimes the interviews that I do or like the questions that I get asked by bigger outlets, it's still deficit framing. It's still
Yes.
done through this like victim story lens.
Mhm.
And yeah, of course, like I've gone through hardship like everybody else has in their entire lives. And also I'm not defined by that. Like I've also produced a lot of work. I've done a lot of research. We've conducted investigations that have literally changed certain policies or conversations in communities. So so it's very interesting to see that like even in myself, I've internalized that victim narrative. And now I'm unpacking like you can also reframe that. You can also
Yes.
like this is a big healing point in just experiencing sexual assault. Like I can go back into those traumatic memories and reframe things, and that's really hard. And if you're somebody who's struggling with any type of trauma, like I would recommend EMDR therapy. There's also a really
Yes,
great book.
ma'am.
Yeah. Oh, great. You know what that
I
is.
do I had done EMDR therapy before anybody knew what it was. I'm like, you don't understand.
Yeah, I didn't
This
know. I
has
was the only one
changed
who
my
I knew was
life.
doing that. Yeah, until we figured it out. Like I started talking about it.
Mhm.
I actually did EMDR while I was doing Sold in America because I was like, why is this
Oh,
series so triggering to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. Like there are these situations that you went through that were not as consensual as you thought. Got
Yes.
it. And so which is very interesting. I mean, I'm also still unpacking that too, is like if you went through traumatic experiences as a kid that you didn't see as traumatic at that time, like
Right.
you have to carry that trauma, or can you just be like, I super passed it, like I don't need to make myself a victim again. But it's tapping into victim consciousness is so a part of our culture, and it's so easy to do, especially I will say within like the Muslim community. Because I've been writing a lot, and I'm realizing that even as I'm talking about misrepresentation, we had like Audible television in my household, and I think we had more Audible channels than we had English channels. And like my dad was always watching Al Jazeera, and every news story I ever saw growing up that had anything to do with Muslims was still around war
Yes.
and just devastation, just always tragedy and devastation. And there was no like the trauma porn was on another level.
mhm.
We were like, I don't even know if we could ever really be desensitized from I mean, eventually you have to get desensitized from all that, but I never, as an empath, I never got desensitized from all that I was seeing. But it definitely, like, it also just wasn't entirely right. I think like the stories, that the way that we tell them, but that's just like how we tell stories. Like we know that when the television is on and we're looking at news, and that's why, like what you were saying, is my like everything that's happening in Afghanistan right now is not a surprise to any of us ever at all. Like we all knew this was going to happen from the beginning. And to see like the world react the way it's like deeply sad. And I have had like so many just moments of breaking down while this story has been unfolding, because it's almost like we knew it, but we didn't. But like maybe a part of us was like, but maybe not. Like maybe it won't.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll never live to see that happen. And then when you do see that happen, you're just like it's just like the anger becomes this deep sadness of look at what we've done. And a huge part of that is because of how we have told stories to justify the moves that we make in countries other than our own. And
Yes.
I see that. So I'm starting to see that now in both lenses of my identity. So growing up and watching American news and television and wanting to be a part of that group of storytellers and wanting to change how I looked and changed how I sounded and changed how I dressed in order to be like those storytellers. Because to me as a kid, I'm like, I hated the hijab because I thought, well, it's not on TV unless it has the word terrorist next to it, or it's like an older woman crying because her child got killed. Like that's what I like, and I see that woman in my head. Like I see that image in my head of seeing that on television and feeling so scared. And that was like on the Arabic news television because that's what we saw of the rest of the world, which by the way wasn't just like the Muslim world. It was just, we were all like, those news channels were always covering tragedy just everywhere else. And now that I say that out loud, I'm like, wow, we were so like before social media, Americans were so blind to what happened in the rest of the world. But when you hold like a bicultural identity, you're so in tune with what's happening at home, like at home in the motherland, even if you weren't born there. And because of that, it's always in relation to other things that are happening in the world. And so you have some type of understanding. And even then, it's not always. I was just talking to this woman who is an actress who plays the role of a hijab wearing woman on a TV show and on an American network television show. And she was sharing with me how she's not Muslim, she's Arab, and not Muslim. And she was sharing with me how like her dad, who is Arab, like told her that she should change her last name and didn't want her to learn Arabic, but wanted her to learn French, and like was so discouraging of his own identity so that she could make it, or so that there was just like this pride point. And I have seen that several times, especially with countries that France colonized. I mean, I see it with every country, obviously, but specifically like the French colonized countries where this idea of like being Arab or knowing Arabi is like less than. And I didn't grow up, like my parents tried to shove Arabi down my throat. Like even when I was living in rural Maryland, they paid for a teacher to come out and drive to see us. We did Sunday school. And my biggest regret in my life is like not taking that seriously. That is like, if somebody would be like, what do you regret? I'd be like that, because I remember this one time I was in gymnastics and I was getting ready for my class and I was doing my Arabic homework, and then I hit it when my teacher came. And my mom was so frustrated with me, and she literally said to the teacher, she's doing her Arabic homework. And my teacher looked at me like as if she had never, literally, she may have never met somebody who knew two languages. And she was like, you know another language? Like as if like she was like, you are, I don't know, you have magical powers. Like that's how shocked she was. And it was the only time during that time when I was in that area where I was like, is that a good thing? Like I didn't know. I just thought, and so it's like you have all of this like internalized colonization, white supremacy, all of it. And you don't even know how to unpack that when you are perfecting the two identities. Like every first gen Muslim kid who has parents who are quote strict unquote, knows what it's like to be two people. You know what it's like to be like the version of you at school and then the version of you at home. And you learn those things from television. Like you learn how to be at school from television, and then and then you learn how to be at home around your family, and then still watch television. When you see that your like people who look like your family are represented a type of way, it's almost like I don't know if I would say I internalized hate. I mean, maybe to an extent. I would have to unpack that more. I definitely internalized confusion, because I just kept thinking to myself, where are they getting all, especially when I remember when like Hillary Clinton made that comment about Muslim Americans being like the eyes and the ears on the ground and I was just like,
What?
I don't know anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I
what
don't
am I
know
missing?
any of these people. Like, I'm so confused. And is this like, so there was just always this confusion. And my family's like very socially active, and my like extended family, and they're very community involved. And so it was just a lot to kind of take in, and I had to figure out, okay, well, who are you? Like, what parts of you are you? Because that is how you identify and what you adopt, and what parts of it are things that are learned behaviors that you question now. And you're like, I don't know if I really agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. This is so that's kind of the process that I'm in right now. And I realized that a huge part of that trauma is really like peeling back the layers of how I saw myself and my people represented on television, film, in the news. And now asking the question finally, like, why were those stories told? Like, who benefited from those stories being told? And we're seeing that now. Like, we're seeing that 20 years. We've been seeing it. It's been fatal to our community. People have gotten killed over this. And now we're finally understanding, the reason that we have however many movies that glorify war and that glorify the American war in Afghanistan is because we needed to justify our actions.
Yeah.
And asking ourselves questions like, well, what came first? Like, did our opinion about the war come first, or did the film come first? Like, what part? So there are so many layers to this that we are working on uncovering.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about that in the last 8 weeks with our Muslims in entertainment and now Muslims in news. Was it the picture or the policy, or the policy or the picture that came first, And so you're right, it is the greatest chicken and the egg story. But I feel like because the research that's been done so far in entertainment, at least, it's like 100 years old. It goes back 100 years and like 1,000 different. There's that one, I forgot the name of the gentleman. I think we mentioned it on one of our podcasts, who looked at like 1,000 depictions of Muslims in entertainment. And every single one was like the same trope, and it was the same like violent terrorist, like, or the exotic oppressed woman who is also like super sexualized. So, all of those things. So you've talked about a lot of things. I kind of wanted to take it back to, how you reconciled I don't want to call it an identity crisis, because I don't think we ever had the crisis. It was so prolonged our whole lives. Like, I didn't know who or what I was.
Yeah, I never really thought about
that. It's not like a crisis is one and done, right?
I say it's a series of crises. Like, that's how I've always said. I'm like, I literally wrote this the other day. I'm like, if you're a first gen kid, you have at least one identity crisis.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. And I tell people that I didn't know what I was until I was 35. So yeah, I really didn't, because it was that confusing. Because like you said, you're one thing at home and then you're one thing outside. And
how many things does that impact? Like, my friend Min Hall, she wrote and directed the film Hela, which was Apple TV's first movie that they bought. It's a coming of age story about a young Muslim American woman. And I was just literally on FaceTime with her last week, and we were talking about control, and we were talking about our work, and just like how it, especially in working in film, like, you want to make sure that you have a lot of control over things, but you never do, because there's so many factors involved. And then we were jokingly talking about, like, where did the need for control in our lives come from? And then I laughed, and we both it was this like realization. I was like, oh, this need for control came from when we were controlling our identities. Like, it came from controlling who we were and how we presented ourselves, because we wanted to make sure that we were safe and okay in the situations that we were in. And that changes who you are as a person.
I think for us, because we're a whole generation older than you are, for us, I think the control, because both of us are very controlling, Zeba and myself, we're also firstborn, so we get you. So there is some birth order
for yourself.
No.
Other than she's 100% right. But
Yeah, she's
anyways,
totally right. So I think for us, it was because the truth was so outside of our control for so long, because like
Yeah.
you, we grew up knowing what was happening back in the motherland. We heard a whole different side of the story, and we had nothing. We were armed with zero, because when we were growing up, I mean, you think you had a few channels when we had 3.
Yeah.
You know, I think, wait,
we actually
did we
had
have the
to turn
Cartoon
the
Network?
TV with a knob. That's
Yeah,
how
we
old
had knobs on
are.
our TVs. So you really couldn't control the truth. And while there was Islamophobia at that time, a lot of it truly was without an agenda. It was literally like out of ignorance. And the bad guy that time was somebody else. We were the good guys. The Afghans were the good guys. Muslims were the good guys. We were just super exotic. And then, of course, 9/11 happened and everything changed. So
Yeah, that's so it's always fascinating to hear that, because I don't know that
you don't know
reality.
anything else. Yeah,
Yeah.
Literally
exactly.
don't know that reality at all. But I do know that when my great uncle came to America and moved to Oklahoma and owned a gas station, he would board the plane and a cowboy hat and a gun in his holster.
Yeah.
And he'd be fine. And I remember when he told me that, and he was basically talking about how TSA is a scam. I agree, basically, mostly. I'll investigate that for you.
TSA was not a thing when we were growing up.
Well, of course, but like the fact that he, like this brown
Mm-hmm.
guy in a cowboy hat and a gun, was able to get on the plane from Oklahoma, Libyan, like it's so remarkable to think that that was a world that people lived in at some point. And the feeling of the truth being out of control, like now that I hear you say it that way too, it makes me realize that we also grew up, oh my God, we also just grew up doubting everything we heard. Like
Yes.
fake news was our thing.
We knew about it.
Like fake news was like everything that we heard on the news. The commentating in the house would just be like, nope, nah,
That's not real.
that's not true. That's not. And it was almost like a back and forth banter that it was a thing that you knew that the news was not telling the truth.
Mhm.
Like, so maybe we grew up just, I mean, I don't know. For me as a journalist, that's great, because I was always questioning everything. And till now, I still believe that you have to like hear things directly from the source to believe them.
Yeah.
And I loved that when you were talking about Afghanistan, you were like, and I'm going to defer to Afghans on that. Like your rundown was so on point and so great. And also like, yeah, that's not our story. Like, that's the point. It's not our story to tell.
Yeah.
It's like, and we can point you to so many Afghans who are telling this story right now. Like, they're the only people we need to be listening to.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's tricky with journalism, because as a journalist, this is like a whole other layered thing, but you don't want to like when I started out, I started in 2009. I was 15. This first story I ever wrote about was about an Iraq war veteran who was at the time 25 or 26. And so like closer to my age. And he had just gotten back from a relief convoy to Gaza in Palestine. And he like did this event where he talked about what he saw. And he also talked about, he's a peace activist, and talked about what he did during the war in Iraq and like how he never knew why he was there. And this was my first story that I ever reported. I wrote for the newspaper. And I just remember thinking like that, like this, I felt comfortable doing that story and I was there. And then once I got into, I think, radio, I just made sure that I wasn't telling Muslim stories, because I so badly didn't want to be typecast. Like I didn't want people to be like, you can only tell the Muslim stories.
Right.
And I did that for I was lucky enough where now when I'm working on a huge investigative project that is focused on Muslims, it's the first time I've done a couple of stories, but it's the first time that I'm doing like an actual project this way. And it's because I'm finally ready to, I didn't realize that this whole time that actually the reason that I was avoiding it was because like I was avoiding me. Like I was avoiding myself. And now I'm in a place where I feel like I've sat with myself enough to be like, oh, like you're ready to tell this story. You're ready to go through this healing process. Because to me, every story that even Sold in America, obviously it was on the sex trade in the US and everything from sex trafficking to prostitution, like legalized sex work and prostitution. But like that story came from me wanting to heal from sexual assault and like wanting to use this trauma to help other people. And so that's kind of what I'm doing again. So it's almost like it's like on my terms. It's not a white person who's telling me,
Yes.
like a white non-Muslim person telling me like, this is the story that you're going to have to do. So it's hard now though, because there's so many citizen journalists too. And when it comes to something like Afghanistan, like I want to hear from Afghans about this.
Yes.
And at the same time, like how do we train people properly within newsrooms to trust that somebody who's not a part of a community can actually do the work to build trust with that community to tell the story the right way? Because even like for me, Sold in America took a really long time because it took me a long time to build trust with sex workers.
Yes.
I myself am not a sex worker, and the sex work community, rightfully so, is very skeptical of the media because they've been so stigmatized that it was a lot of work and some fruitless efforts that had to go into it to say like, hey, I'm here to be of service and like to amplify your voice. Like I'm not speaking for you. And so now I'm seeing it through that lens. And I think that it really comes down to the journalist and the work that they've done to show that they prove that they've built trust with people. So that's what we hope to do. And that's why we tell stories the way that we do.
I love that you said that. And, I feel like this is kind of a therapy session, like a cross-generational therapy session. As you're talking, we're talking. And honestly, you're kind of giving me, my oldest just turned 18 this past week.
Happy
And
birthday.
I know, my baby. And it's one of those things where he talks like you, right? He doesn't understand the story and the history because he has never known them before.
Yeah.
And that is just the fact that you're reiterating that to me as a mother is definitely something that I'm taking to heart, because he doesn't know a life before 9/11, has pretty much shaped his entire identity and fighting lack thereof. And it's funny because I was on the phone with Uzma when recently the Afghanistan, there was the bombing. He happened to be wearing his Salam peace shirt, and he literally wrote me and he was like, oh, shit, yes, he curses and I'm okay with that. And he's like, I'm wearing the shirt and everyone is looking at me because of course they have their phones in the room and they're getting these alerts. He's like, what do I do? And I said, honey, Salam still means peace, and you are the person to embody that. Keep doing what you're doing because you're living your truth. And he definitely appreciated it later. But the fact that I have to have these conversations with him in the middle of the day, because he's like, shoot, what do I
it's
do?
like an anxiety. It's like this.
It's an anxiety thing.
You have to think about
Yes.
what you're wearing or what you look like or what you say or what, and you have to, and it's like you grow up expected to like be a
Talking
head for
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm just like, but I don't even know. I remember I just told Adam this story when I was in 7th grade. My history teacher, Mrs. Richardson, I remember like in our textbook we were learning about like world religions and the 3 biggest religions, and Islam was one of them. And I got so like taken aback. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first. I was like, is this something that we're going to talk about? And I don't know what inspiration, something must have hit me like a ton of bricks, because I go, I'm Muslim. Like I just, I threw it up. Like it was so wild because that was very unlike me. But I got so excited and I was like, I'm such a participatory butterfly in class. Like I always had my hand raised. And I remember the teacher, the first question she asked me, not joking, she just goes, well, are you Sunni or are you Shiite?
Yeah,
And
that's really common.
Literally was so embarrassed because I didn't know what those meant. And I told her I was Shiite. I was like, Shiite? And I like, my family is Sunni. Like I don't really think, like I don't do the sect thing, but I had no idea what that was. And I went home and I asked my parents. I was like, are we Sunni or Shia? And my mom was like, why are you asking that? And I told her, and I told her that I said I was Shia, and she like laughed because I had just never known. Like that was the first thing that my teacher asked me when she found out that she had a Muslim in her class. Like I don't know why, but who knows? Maybe it's because like in Christianity, the sex thing is a
Denominations
bigger,
matter. Yeah.
I don't know, but but then it's like I didn't even. After that, I still didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what the Sunni and Shia was until I was in high school, and that was because my family's our best family friends are Shia, and I learned about it because they pray a little bit differently, and I didn't know that, and that was it, and I was just like, oh. So everything that came after when I like started learning more about that, I was like, oh, that all comes down to politicization. Like people just talk about that out of politics, not because they're like, oh, we're Muslim. Let's talk about what, like, no, it's not, I don't know. It's just no one's business. So it's like, even as a kid, it just didn't feel like, I don't know. It just wasn't welcoming to be able to talk about that. So there's like no room to be excited or even curious, and it's sad because I'm like I'm literally the most curious person I know on the face of the planet, and it took me so long to be curious about that part of myself, but now I am, and now I'm so curious about it, and I'm so loving to that version of myself, like to the 7th grade Noor, to the 1st grade Noor, to all of those versions of myself. I love her so deeply. And she needed to go through all of those things, and she needed to carry that shame so that we could do something about it today. And also, I don't want anyone to ever have to go through that. Like your son is why I'm doing this project, because I think that we deserve a comprehensive body of work that can guide people through that identity crisis with like actual facts to be like, hey, by the way, that thing that you feel, this is why.
That's really awesome. I wish we'd had that growing up, right, Zeba? Oh, she's on mute. You're on mute, babe.
Name it to tame it,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like that's kind of a philosophy. Like when you can give it the name, you can understand it, and honestly, it empowers you. So like everything that you've been doing through your EMDR and your therapy, Noor, it sounds to me like you're empowering your internal self to get you where you need to do so that you can now start telling the stories or shaping or giving them the voice so that their stories can be told. Because I feel like through storytelling, we can really learn and grow with one another and what we're all going through. And I love that you're doing that. And now you're embracing one of your identities, and you're letting her shine. So I am so excited to see the 1st grade Noor and the 7th grade Noor, because you're definitely giving us something to look forward to with our kids too. We need more role models so that they can embrace their multiple identities, and be very thankful that they've gone through the experiences that they have. And hopefully in another 20 years, we're not dealing with another Afghanistan. I'll tell you that right now. But
yeah,
you know, as
I mean,
a mom,
I think that we all need tools to understand the role that I think we all need tools to understand the role that storytelling plays in our lives, because I don't even think like we are the first generation to grow up with the internet the way that we did.
yes.
And even me I'm 27 turning 28, and social media didn't start for me until high school, which to me like seemed really young, but now my 10-year-old brother is better at using a computer than I am.
Yeah.
And building worlds on Minecraft and stuff.
So
like we have to teach people really young how to watch out for misinformation,
100%.
how to not fall down that rabbit hole of YouTube videos, of television shows, of things, because that's how we were telling people their storylines. Because we look for ourselves in everything. Kids look for themselves in everything. The first time, I always say the first time I ever felt true representation was when I watched Rami. And I literally, he had sent my husband and I the first season before it came out, and we sat in one sitting and watched it. And Adam and I looked at each other, and I literally said, is like I feel like I'm being spied on is what representation feels like.
Yeah.
And I had never known that heightened
Sense
sense
of
of
awareness.
representation. I'm like, this is what white people have been feeling this whole time. Like, this is what they're feeling. Like every show that, of course you're going to be
I get
obsessed with every
it.
show because you're going to see, because even, listen, I loved Sex in the City and Friends. And I also found ways to see myself, I guess, in those shows. I did. And the excitement, and I loved it. I got it. And also, like, you're still always not them. Like, you're
Yeah.
still always
With
not
Friends,
a
it was
part
like,
of
we
it.
can never do that. So let's live vicariously through these 6 characters. So yeah.
Yeah, like it's just different. I mean, everybody has their own version of those, like, you know, friendship groups and stuff, but it's just really cool to know that. And it's also really sad to know that, like, it was so limited. But I think now, like, I don't need to only see a Muslim family on television to feel represented. I definitely always identified with shows that were BIPOC led because their nuances are very similar to ours.
Yeah.
And there's just like more of a, I don't know, it's like a camaraderie. Like, it just feels closer to home. And also, like, we just need more, like, within the diversity, we need more diversity.
Yes.
Within the that's just really what it comes down to, because we always need continuously evolving perspectives, and that's just more fun. Like, it's just exciting that way. And to me, I'm like, wow, it's taken us this long. Like, why are we so boring?
I think it's because news came to us in there was a certain format, and there was 2 people that used to give us the news, maybe 3 when we were growing up. I think Walter Cronkite was dead by the time we were old enough to understand news, but we had Peter Jennings and we had Ted Koppel. And those are the 2 dudes, the 2 white dudes who never pronounced Muslim correctly, by the way. We were always Muslim.
My dad actually took me to meet Ted Koppel at his hospital. That's a really good story.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I was always mad at him. So you probably liked him. I always was really mad at him. I was like, you can't even say who I am correctly.
I see. I didn't even know that. I just knew my dad introduced me. My dad was like, Ted Koppel's opening a wing in the hospital. You need to study this journalist. You need to come and talk to him. And my dad's dream was always for me to be like a war correspondent.
That's awesome.
And now that I think about it, it's also because, like, he knew I was going to be a journalist, and that was the journalism that he saw.
Yeah, exactly. That's all we knew.
Which I'm like, oh,
yeah,
got it.
And that's exactly it. This formula is changing.
The stuff that I do, like, that kind of storytelling came later with people like Lisa Ling, like Bourdain, like even Anderson Cooper and Christiane Amanpour and Sold Out. Like, they still developed, I would say, more Lisa. Like, Lisa Ling, when she started doing those segments for Oprah, like, that's that deep human interest storytelling that, like, made you see people and not just issues. But yeah, so that's really disappointing to hear about Ted Koppel. I also had Peter Jennings, speech coach.
Poor thing.
Woman who taught Peter Jennings how to report was my speech coach, and I had a horrible experience with her. But those are like the 2 people that I knew you had to. I mean, I knew that was like the creme de la creme growing up.
And you felt like you probably had to change or alter or emulate them in order to.
Oh yeah, I just literally wrote a whole chapter about that. Like, I coming to my voice and realizing that I sounded fine, and I just needed to tune up my own voice. But there's this thing about the reporter's voice that you're just we're like, when I was a kid, I was so drawn to, and I thought, like, you had to talk this way. But I also thought it was always weird because I remember when I was young thinking, but that's not how I tell my friends a story.
Yeah.
And I get more excited when I tell my friends a story. And so don't I want to be that don't I want to tell it the same way? And I realized my rule that I may have gotten this from my mentor, Manny, who was like my biggest journalism mentor, but my rule was always to tell a story or report a story the way I would to my friend.
I love that. And that probably makes you more relatable to other people, and it makes you more authentic and genuine when you're actually talking to
Mhm.
your friend. You're showing them your true identity versus this persona that you're
Yeah.
trying to
It's
portray.
well, yeah, it's a lot less exhausting. I mean, I'm very
Yeah.
big on
You can be yourself.
I've always felt like the wearing a mask or putting on a persona is
Yes.
really it takes out too much energy, and I already put so much energy in all of the things that I do that I can get very tired very quickly. And so I found that if I was trying to be something or trying to be like something, that I might as well just take a nap on the floor right there. So I literally didn't have it in me to do that. And also it goes very against my nature. Like if the way that you see me online or on a podcast or whatever, like that's how I am in person. And if I'm not like that in person and I'm extra quiet, it's probably because I was like that a lot and I need time, I need space.
Yes, because you're probably like me. You're an introvert on some level, so you need that time to
Mhm.
like decompress.
Yeah, which I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
What I realized,
Everyone assumes you're an extrovert, but you're actually an introvert, right?
it's so interesting because, well, I maybe I'm like split down the middle because I definitely do recharge alone now, but I also just spent 2 weeks in a cabin alone, and I've like learned to love to be alone, so
Mhm.
that's new. Um, but I do recharge a lot with my loved ones, like my family
Yeah.
members and my very close friends. But I have like a very intimate circle. Like I've
Mhm.
always, um, I'm very friendly with so many people, and the people that I talk to regularly is a handful of people.
Yeah.
And when I somehow talking to strangers is a lot easier for me than talking to like people that maybe it's because I know that they have like a specific maybe agenda, or I assume that and I project that, or maybe it's just like strangers are not really asking me of anything, and I really just enjoy people telling me stories. I really do. So I can always push through, like even at the podcast movement event and talking to people afterwards and stuff like that always feels really great, and I feel really energized afterwards, and then later I just knock. Like I fall asleep. I go to sleep.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
And that
hide.
evening, remember, like
Was
Zeba
that
was out.
evening the dinner?
Yeah,
I was
that
like, I
dinner.
can't
She was like,
Yeah,
I,
do this
I want to
anymore.
go
I need
home.
to
I
go
want to
home.
go home.
I'm like,
Yeah.
Cosma, I need to leave. I can't talk to anybody. But you're so used to talking and asking the questions. So we have a segment that we call rapid fire. And Uzma's going to set a timer, and I'm going to ask you the questions now. So are
Woohoo!
you ready? Are you ready
I'm
for this?
so
Uzma,
ready.
Hold on. Is it, I
Uzma,
forget, is it 30 seconds or is it 60
it's
seconds?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, hold on.
And
1 minute rapid fire. Okay.
We're going to get
Ready?
down and
I'm
dirty.
so
Are you
quick.
ready,
I'm
Noor?
gonna be so good.
Good.
Okay.
Never had a better guest.
Okay.
Ready, set, go.
What is your most used emoji?
Oh, honestly, it might be the one with the like cute black like the big black eyes that she's like making a little like kitty face.
The pouty
It has to be
face.
that one.
The I'm in love phase. What is the book that you're currently reading right now?
I just finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X during my time in the cabin, and I also just finished this book literally just finished yesterday. Actually, the book this book I finished this morning. It's called This Is How You Make a Movie, and it's
I
a
love that.
really beautiful, gorgeous book that it just has like inspiration from all the greatest, and then breaks
my
down
God,
a
I'm
lot
gonna
of their
check.
techniques.
We'll add that to our book club,
Yeah.
book club list.
Oh, and
But
I'm sorry, I'm also reading the book on audiobook, and I'm new to audiobooks, and it's amazing. I'm reading What Happened to You by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry, and it's on trauma and resilience, and it's incredible. It's an incredible audiobook. Like I wouldn't even recommend reading it as text. And then, of course, I'm going to plug these books that I just
Yes, that's our favorite trilogy. Woohoo!
my favorite trilogy. So Shannon literally just sent me signed copies of the book.
Awesome, lucky.
I'm so excited. I wanted them. I already finished them before she sent them to me, and then
aren't they so
They're the
good?
best,
I
man.
read this whole stack. It has to be like more than 2,000 pages. I read the whole thing
1 week.
the whole thing I read in like about a month. But
isn't it so good? So we're literally telling everybody about it.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
like,
it's
please
one
buy
of-
the book.
We're like,
it's the
"Buy the
series
book,
that
she's
I
amazing."
read on I took a trip to Jamaica, which was my first vacation in basically my entire life, like that, where I do nothing. And it's basically the book that like made me fall in love with reading again, because growing up I read so much fantasy because, you know, immigrant kids and escapism.
Mhm.
Yeah. And Harry Potter and all
Harry
that was
Potter,
really
we all loved it,
popular,
yeah.
Next gen
and
kids.
it's-
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. But this is, and so she's going to be on our book club too. And that's something we're going to be starting on Fireside, which is where we met you.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
cool.
so, and we're going to have her on the show as well. We're super excited because Uzma did
By the
cyber.
way,
Totally
sorry, I
stalked
stink
and
at rapid
fangirled.
fire. That
Yeah, it's
rapid
totally
fire
been a minute.
questions. Yeah, I was just gonna say you started out with the book question, and I was like, do you?
I should have
use-
ended it with the book question because
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite my favorite things.
Do you
But
want me to put seconds on the clock or something?
You can
The
put
30
you can
34
put seconds.
seconds
Let me start
because-
over.
I know you're like, darn it. But because as a journalist, I want to know what your favorite word is.
Well, the word that just came to my mind is delightful.
Ooh,
And the reason for that is actually because of something that happened from that pod movement event. But I'm not going to share that story because I'm on a timer and also because I'm writing about it. But
Ooh.
but currently the word delightful and delight has been having like deep feeling meaning for me.
I love that. And this is your last question, since we have been talking about movies and all that and
Mhm.
representation, and we're going to wrap it our representation series up. If someone were to play you in a movie, like the movie of your life, who would that be?
That's a good one.
That's so good. Oh,
So you're lucky because you have options. When we were growing up, there was like Meg Ryan and Demi Moore.
Yeah, we're
And
like,
Julia Roberts. That's all we had.
that's hilarious. Wow.
You have so
Um,
many.
I have never thought about that. I
Oh,
have
you should.
never thought about that.
you should think about it, put it in your book,
Mhm.
and then make sure you tag
That's like
me.
manifesting it, right?
Part of me is like, I don't want anyone to play me in a movie. I want to
I
play.
want
me
to
in
play
a-
myself. in a-
Oh,
I mean,
that's
by
even
the
because you
way-
want to tell your own story.
No, but I also
Exactly.
like don't want to play myself, and I don't want to be in a scripted film about myself. Like I'm not an Issa Rae. I can't do that. Hold on, Adam.
When in doubt, ask the husband.
Yeah,
And she
If-
better be really cute. Tell him.
yeah, she better be really cute. If someone were to play me in a movie, an actor, Mila Kunis, yeah, in his
I could see
Oh, totally. I could see that.
I like how that was
Adam
right on
said
the top of his
obviously for
head.
multiple reasons. Yeah, that
He
was
was like,
Now go beat him up because she's cute.
no, I mean, I think she's cute. I think
Yeah.
that's great. Like, thank you. Actually, that's so funny because in school when I was growing up, kids used to call me Jackie because of that
Yeah.
70s show. Because she played Jackie in that 70s show where she was with Ashton Kutcher, which is like a whole full circle thing. And I thought it was awesome because she had dark hair. Like that is like we didn't have people with dark hair, and so people would call like, she has like big eyeballs, and I have big eyeballs and dark hair. And so to me, Mila Kunis was representation.
Yeah.
Like that actually like made me feel right. That's a great answer. Wow. Thanks.
Good job,
Jennifer.
Adam. We're really proud of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, now we know that we have storytellers that are actually representative, that our kids will be growing up seeing you on the screen, people that look like you, look like them on the screen, walk, talk like them. So it's going to be trust building, and we really appreciate all the great work that you're doing and the real news that you're telling, which is in these stories. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you so much. And I hope that if you're a parent listening to this, that you know that if you see any type of curiosity in your kid towards anything, just push them into their curiosity, because that is the only reason that I am where I am, is because my parents saw and cultivated a curiosity in me without like trying to control what that curiosity was.
Yes.
I never felt pressure to be anything except for who I was. And that I'm so grateful for. And I remember saying when I was younger, Like I would have always been a much better journalist than I would have been. I will always have been a much more successful journalist than a successful doctor because one, depending on how you choose to define success, I don't choose to define success by how much money you have, but because I was always I had the love for it. And if you're trying to push your kid into doing something that they don't love, like know that you're ruining their chances of success, and you might have to help redefine your own.
I love that.
100%. That is true. So we hope they all listen, and we'd love to have you back on sometime and connect later. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know you're really busy and probably still at the cabin, so please go relax and reset, and we will try to do the same.
Thank you, Uzma. Thank you, Zeba.
I hope you guys have a great day. Assalamu alaikum.
This episode of Mommyingwhilemuslim is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Join Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, president of Zaytuna College and Guidance Residential, for a live webinar on how Islamic home financing is providing a permissible path for Muslim Americans to finance their homes. Register for very limited online seats at gr.link/MWM_NCW_Hamza HAMZA_YUSUF.